Lesson number 2. Your gifts and talents belong to God. As Christians, Daniel and his friends were faced with challenges but stood fast. How did they do it? We are told in Daniel chapter 1 verse 3 that the king instructed that some of these young men from Israel be brought to serve in the king's palace. So very early in the chapter, we learned that these young men were taken away from what they knew. They were taken captive and trained and taught something new. How do we know that? Because we are told that they would be taught the language and the literature of the Chaldeans for 3 years. Now, being in the king's presence, these young men must have taken that training very serious. So they must have had an in-depth knowledge of that new culture. There is no account in the history of Daniel where he allowed his newly acquired knowledge to change who he was becoming. What they now knew was different because they came from a place where the God of creation was worshipped, and they now lived in a place where a man-made image was being worshipped. However, these young men were able to remain true to what they knew. There are many things that could have served as distractions. One, their looks. We are told they were young men with no blemish but good looking. This is one of the qualities that allow them to be chosen by the king. However, in today's world, this is one of the qualities that so easily throw guard our people. Their looks. It is so sad to see our beautiful young women and handsome young men wasting their lives away. They could have used their looks to get the prettiest women, but Daniel and his friends were not distracted by the things of this world. Number 2, they were gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand. These young men, we are told, were gifted in all wisdom. They knew true wisdom is from God and would not use this wisdom and knowledge in any other way but to glorify God. We are told in Daniel chapter 2 verses 17 to 18. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Daniel, even with what he knew, didn't put his wisdom ahead of what God is able to do for him and through him. But rather, he consulted with his friends and sought the help of God. Today, God's people blessed with knowledge, skills, and talents are sometimes forgetting where these gifts came from. Life decisions are made without consulting God first. God bless us with the gifts of understanding, which we can use to help another who are not so able to quickly understand. But we allow these opportunities to pass us by because we are too knowledgeable. Their wisdom, knowledge, and understanding could have been a distraction and used otherwise, but it was used to glorify God. Number 3, the opportunity to serve in the king's palace. So many people would give anything to serve in the king's palace. These young men had that opportunity and they did not allow it to become a distraction. They never got swell-headed in any way and lose track of accomplishing their purpose. They never allowed the thought of opposition to lead them into making decisions that will negatively impact their future. They remain true to God and allow God to push them into prominent positions. They grew up knowing exactly what we are being taught today, and that is to love and honor God and reflect His glory. And we are told that they remain true to what they believe, even after being taught and trained in a strange land. Sister White tells us in Messages to Young People, chapter 3, We are not to try to climb up to high positions or to gain the praise of men. Our aim should not be to be the greatest. We are to have an eye single to the glory of God. We are to work with all the intelligence that God has given us, placing ourselves in the channel of light that the grace of God can come upon us to mold and fashion us to the divine similitude. Daniel's understanding was from God, and we too have the privilege of having that understanding. In the same chapter 3 of Messages to Young People, we are again told, we shall be tested and tried. We may be called to spend wakeful nights, but let such times be spent in earnest prayer to God, that he may give understanding and quicken the mind to discern the privileges that are ours. We will meet obstacles, but after overcoming the first, the other one will become easier. Not everything that is placed before you is the right thing for you, ladies and gentlemen. Like Daniel, we need to seek God. Lesson number 3. Do not allow anyone to label you. In today's world, while some hold their names in high regard because of its significance to them, for others, a name is just a name. With the Hebrew boys, we understand that their name wasn't just a name, but that their name had meaning which was of utmost importance to them. The king was not satisfied with just training these young men, but with all intent set out to transform them into a new image. And knowing the importance of names, he thought to change their names. We are told that the names were changed. Daniel, whose name meant God is my judge. Hananiah, God is gracious. Mishael, God is like God. And Azariah, God helps. Their names were now changed, and they were given names, Babylonian names, which actually represented new gods. We have Daniel, who was now known as Belshazzar, meaning Bel, protect the king. And we are told in Jeremiah 51, verse 44, that Bel was a Babylonian king. Hananiah, Shadrach, meaning command of Aku. Mishael, Meshach, meaning the Babylonian mood god. Azariah, Abednego, meaning the Babylonian god of wisdom, Nebu. In our SDA Quarterly, first quarter 2020, we studied why the name changed, and what we discovered is that the names were changed signifying new indoctrination. 1. They wanted to indoctrinate them. Number 2, it was also a sign of change of ownership. So here they were being told that they now belong to the Babylonian king. Number 3, and also the name change signified a change of destiny. Now this I find very interesting, because to go to the extent of wanting to change someone's destiny is beyond comprehension. This is where I encourage you to put your hands in the hands of God, that no man can determine your destiny. Number 4, the name change also meant that the king now had authority over the Hebrew boys. And number 5, in order to fit in, the names were now changed from Hebrew to Babylonian names. Here we see that these young men names were changed as a way of getting them to forget their God, their culture, and what they knew. This name change was a way of getting them to conform to the ways of Babylon. Today, these young men are known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to many. But knowing who they were and what they believed in, I would think that these young men would stick with their Hebrew names, which signify their connection with their true God. Their names were changed in an attempt to label them and dictate their new lifestyle and relationship. Let God be the one to label you. Stick with whatever he has labeled you with. You are a child of not just a king, but you are a child of the king. Do not allow anyone to change that label into what they think you should be or become. When God calls you holy, holy you are. When God calls you anointed, anointed you are. When he calls you beloved, beloved you are. Do not allow the world to change your label and place their identity on you. And even if they should, remember whose you are. Messages to Young People, chapter 16 tells us, God's stamp is upon us. He has bought us and he desires us to remember that our physical, mental, and moral powers belong to him. Time and influence, reason, affection, and conscience all are God's and are to be used only in harmony with his will. They are not to be used in accordance with the direction of the world, for the world is under a leader who is at enmity with God. We may not be able to control our circumstances, but we can change how we respond to our circumstances. Let me just remind you that like Daniel and the three Hebrew boys, I encourage you, ladies and gentlemen, young people, to stand. I dare you to be a Daniel. I dare you to stand alone. Remember, we serve God and not man.